deployed to Vietnam in October. And one story that's kind of cute. I'm on the flight deck, and I'm no longer can I see California. California's gone, no land, can't see anything, and there's just water out there. And I'm just a young 18-year-old. I'm just looking at all this water, and an older sailor came up to me and kind of looked, saw how young I was, couldn't shave and stuff like that, and he says, "A lot of water out there, isn't there?" I said, "Yes, sir, there is." And he says, "That's just the top."
My name is Thad David. I'm a former Marine Recon Scout sniper with 2 deployments to Iraq. As a civilian, I've now facilitated hundreds of personal and professional development trainings across the country. And it struck me recently that the same things that help civilians will also help veterans succeed in their new roles as well. Join me as we define civilian success principles to inspire veteran victories. Welcome to another episode. I'm here today with Bart Bartholomew, a Navy veteran. How are you doing, Bart?
Hey, Dad, I'm doing great. Good to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Oh man, absolutely. Thank you. I'm really happy that you're joining on the show, and I'm really excited to hear your story.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that?
I say it's not that big of a story, but it's kind of fun.
Well, I think it speaks to your humility, because I think you've got a pretty wonderful one. But let's dive into it. And when did you join the Navy? What got you to join the Navy?
Uncle Sam sent me a little piece of paper, said, "You're drafted."
Okay.
so when I got that piece of paper, I talked to some other people that had enlisted prior to this. So I said, I think the Army sounds like a lot more work. Navy sounds like a lot more adventure. So I crossed the state line into Kansas, found a Navy recruiter, and said, "Hey, is it okay to do this kind of thing? Is it legal?" He said, "Absolutely." So I joined the Navy.
Oh wow! So you actually got drafted, and then you just jumped over a different state, and then enlisted into the.
Well, I didn't. There was recruiters in Colorado, but they were in Denver, a long ways away, and I knew there was a recruiter over in Goodland, Kansas, and that was only 30 miles from my hometown. So it was just a convenient thing for me to do. It wasn't
right.
It was because it was a state law or anything like that. I just got my draft notice and didn't want to go to the Army.
Wow. What was it like to receive a draft notice? It's something that we always hear about, but I've never actually talked to anybody that got a draft notice.
I'm 17. I'm 17, going to be 18, and it's a piece of paper. Obviously, while you're in high school, some of the people that were graduated before you, some got drafted, some got enlisted. So when they come home, you hear some of their stories. But when I got my draft notice, I knew I was going to have to go, because it's one of those conversations that we all had when we graduated from high school. And it was like they had a radar on me. I get my high school diploma, and I go out and smile, and I go to the mailbox, and there's a draft notice. Didn't happen that fast, but it seemed like it happened pretty quick, because got out in June and went into the Navy in August.
Wow. I mean, that's a very quick thing.
Yeah,
and what a big decision.
Yep.
Yeah, what a big decision to have to make at 17, going on 18. That's
well, I was 17 when I graduated.
Okay.
Turned 18, and so my birthday was in July. So graduation, birthday, joined the Navy.
All right. And so you joined the Navy, and then what did you do in the Navy, and what was that like? Did you get deployed immediately?
Well, I can't talk about other military service branches and how their boot camp is, other than the fact that when I was in San Diego, I usually got to sleep in, but what woke me up wasn't a company commander coming in. It was a damn Marine Corps on the other side, because they'd been up 2 hours early, and they were making noise because they were out there running and screaming and acting like idiots over there. So we said, could you hold it down? We're trying to sleep over here. Don't you have any respect? But no, that was the MCDR, Marine Corps Recruiting Depot, that was right next to us. So that's a joke we always say to the Marines. I'd have been a lot better sailor if you guys would let me sleep a little longer, but you guys got up so damn early. So anyway, got the. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, and the feud starts that quickly. That's how quickly you realize the
Yeah,
feud
yeah,
between branches. It's like, man, these
exactly. Basic
guys.
training, man.
Yep.
Right off the bat. So,
Wow.
but anyway, went through basic training. Scored high enough for school to get a school in New London, Connecticut. I was going to be go to school for sonar technician because I had a buddy that was in submarines, and I thought, well, I visited him, got into his sub, got to look at it and stuff like that. Thought that'd be a pretty cool thing to do. So I did the school, or I didn't do the school. I graduated from basic training, and then to go back a little bit. While I was in basic training, I was a pretty good swimmer, and you gotta graduate the swimming class before you get out of the Navy, because in the Navy you see water, you better know how to swim. And believe
Mm-hmm.
it or not, there was a ton of young boys that did not know how to swim. So there was a lot of swimming going on, and teaching these kids how to swim. Well, I was a good enough swimmer that I was called while we was in basic training. I was called over to the swimming pool once in a while to help some of the instructors with some of these kids who was having struggle. So I say that story because when I got out of boot camp and got my orders to New London, Connecticut, while I was home, I got a letter from at my home address from the Navy Department saying, we changed your orders. You're going back to Coronado, California. You're going to be in a swimming program. We want you to probably go into UDT, which is underwater demolition, and then that eventually works into the SEAL program, which was just had been started. So my orders changed. I go back to San Diego or Coronado, and I get into that program and found out that I was not as good a swimmer as they needed, because I never had a chance to ring the bell because I never got into that program. But I could not pass some of the tests that they had for underwater demolition. So that quickly changed, and that didn't take but about 3 weeks, close to a month, and then I got some new orders to go to Long Beach, California, and get on a ship. And all I knew is the ship's name was USS Valley Forge, and didn't know too much about it. I mean, I'm from eastern Colorado, dry land. Biggest lake is the Bonnie Dam, and biggest boat's probably 18 feet long. So that 18 feet's a big ship to me, So I get out there, and I walk up the pier to my new ship, and I'm looking at this city. It's 3 football fields long, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of tons of steel, and I'm just overwhelmed. And I'm not the only one that happened to. I know, no matter what branch, when you see a ship that big, you got to stop and think a lot of stuff. So anyway, got on the Valley Forge, and I didn't have what everybody else calls an MOS. I was a swimmer, but I didn't get on the dive team there with the ship, so I got into an outfit called Combat Cargo. And anytime you hear something you want to interrupt that, just go ahead, because I'm like an energized bunny. You hit that switch, and I just go, and I don't shut up until the battery dies or somebody interrupts me. So
No, I will take note of that, but I'm really just very interested in hearing your story. I love where this is going, and hearing the kind of the trajectory of what it was like for you in the military.
well, I enjoyed my time. To let everybody know, it was a good 3 years and kind of like 9 months of time that I'm glad I didn't miss. But now I got to think where I was.
You're a combat cargo, I believe you called it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. You're going to have to do that every once in a while, because the gray matter outside kind of curled in and kind of screwed up the brain for me thinking once in a while. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But anyway, on we go.
I got
Combat cargo.
the same thing. My little grays that are coming in are doing. I have to constantly ask people, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, good. So keep me on track. So combat cargo was a group of about 12 to 15 sailors that worked with cargo, uh, combat cargo, and the combat part of it is we did not go aboard land or go to land to do the cargo replenishment stuff. We did everything on the ship, and ships have holds, HOLD, holds, and that's where they put stuff in the ship in different compartments, and they do it through different levels of the ship. Sometimes there might be 13 or 14 levels on like an aircraft carrier, and we might go down to deck 3 and have certain stuff on deck 3, and then deck 4 have something else. But so we know where everything's going to be, and when we get it on board, we put it in those holes, and then when we deploy and we need something, we take them out of those holes and we put them up on the flight deck. The flight deck is the very top platform of the ship where the aircraft takes off. And let me keep me on track about the cargo holes, because I'm going to divert to something else. The aircraft carrier I was on was a CVA. It's a combat vertical aircraft carrier. It had airplanes that took off from a catapult and landed them with a tail hook. Okay. Well, that was built in 1945, commissioned 1946, served all the time in Korea. The ship was very instrumental in a lot of stuff at the very, very, very beginning of the Korean War. So it got a lot of battle stars awarded to it for the deployments they had. So in 1960, Vietnam was really ramping up. There were the problems in that country, and so the Navy started looking at these aircraft carriers and saying, we need something closer to land with helicopters that can get in close to land and do their job and then come back, because the plane aircraft carriers were way out to sea, but they could go fast, do what they needed to do, and then come back, and so they could be far away. Well, helicopters don't have that much fuel, and they're not as fast as a jet, so they decided they would develop a LPH. The aircraft carrier was a CV, carrier vertical. Now I'm on an LPH, landing platform, and then for helicopters. So that's what the LPH stands for. So when we would get all the cargo up on the flight deck where they would land, what we do is we'd put out a probably about a 20 by 20 cargo net that's got rope intertwined with itself, and then it's got 4 great big metal steel hooks intertwined with the cargo net. Then we'd fold all of them up, and then we would link them together. Then the helicopter would come in, and we'd put a 20-foot pole. And can I cuss on my video?
I don't know that it would be a military veteran podcast if we wouldn't allow cursing. Okay. Yeah.
This 20-foot pole was made of kind of fiberglass. Well, we call it the donkey dick. And so every time we would go out to get under a helicopter, we would take our 20-foot donkey dick and stand under a CH-46, which you Marines had in Vietnam, and they were a twin rotor helicopter similar to the CH-47, but the CH-47 was a 4-pod landing wheels, and the Chinook, the CH-46, was a 3. So the Chinook was a 4, and the Sea Knight was a 3.
I've been on several CH-46s in my time.
All right. So
so I'm very familiar with them. Rappelled out of them, lots of different things. Very familiar with them.
So that's exactly what we did. So when they were not carrying troops, which we also helped the deploying of the Marines when they would go in country, we would put them on the hangar deck, which is one level where they do all the maintenance and stuff like that for all the helicopters. We would have the Marines assemble in a certain area by certain, however you guys lined up your squads or companies or your platoons, whatever you did. But you got these little clusters, and then we would take these little clusters and put them on an elevator, and when a big elevator, we'd lift them up, and then we would escort them to which helicopters they would go to. So that was part of our job too. But once we would get done with that, we drove forklifts and did all that. Well, once we got done with all that, the ships helicopter were gone, and then we would wait until they came back, and they would come back. Some of them with the same thing. They would come back and bring that cargo net down, and whatever the stuff they brought back was to be reused again. And the only and this is the toughest part of our job is, and it didn't happen to every ship, and I can't tell you how many ships. We became a mortuary. There was in '68 there was a pretty heavy battle in country with both the Army and the Navy and the Marines, and it was called Tet Offensive, and that Tet Offensive caused an awful lot of casualties, and there was not enough space for the young boys that were killed, so they would bring them back on the sea nights, and we would take them and we'd put them on the hangar deck, and we cordoned off an area and roped it off, and there was a temporary morgue until they had places to send the KIAs, and we were in charge of protecting our fallen veterans and our brothers. So it was kind of tough when you had to know that there's 150, 200 body bags over there, that there's 17, 18-year-old boys who did the same thing I did, signed up to serve their country, but they did the ultimate sacrifice. So that's lived with me for a long, long time. And I never really brought that up when I talked to other people, but I remember that I didn't want to talk about it because it was sobering, and
What was that like?
They were there less than 8 to 10 to 12 hours, but nevertheless, once we found homes for wherever they was going, I don't even know what it was called. Once they were picked up, then we would get another batch, and this happened for about 2 weeks during.
So you were getting rotating batches.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We stayed in that area through Tet Offensive, for the first Tet, and I bring this up because I graduated basic training in '67. Ended up on the Valley Forge in October. Deployed to Vietnam in October. And one story that's kind of cute. I'm on the flight deck, and I'm no longer can I see California. California's gone, no land, can't see anything, and there's just water out there. And I'm just a young 18-year-old. I'm just looking at all this water, and an older sailor came up to me and kind of looked, saw how young I was, couldn't shave and stuff like that, and he says, "A lot of water out there, isn't there?" I said, "Yes, sir, there is." And he says, "That's just the top." So that put a whole new perspective on a lot of water out there. Because all I was really looking at was just a large body of water, not thinking that's just the top. So that stuck with me forever. Every time I would get up there and I'd look, I would say, "My goodness gracious, how far we can see without seeing land, how long we're out there without seeing land." And I'm just one of millions of sailors and Marines that have done the same thing.
Well, I think that just made me think of, because one thing that I'm discovering as I talk to people, and I spoke with a woman recently who had a gentleman from Vietnam reach out to her because he was having issues with his son, because his son was a mechanic in the Iraq War. And he was like, well, what did you see? You didn't really see that much. And we tend to label what somebody must have seen by their title in the military. And that just made me think of that. It's, it looks like it's far out there, but the depth of service is something that we don't really get to see. And just from what you mentioned, being in cargo, I was not expecting you to share that. And that's a depth at which, like you said, is a very, very sobering experience to see that many bodies come in. But what was that like to witness that, to be a part of that at that young age?
Well, that brings up a fact of just what you're touching on. You don't know what that veteran saw because of that veteran's title or area where he went. So when I talk to veterans and they say I didn't do much, it's a simple thing. I say anybody that raised their right hand and took that oath to protect foreign and domestic, go to basic training. You have no idea where you're going to end up when you come out of basic training. You don't know if you're going to be a mechanic turning a wrench, or a typist, a nurse, a doctor. You don't know anything until you deploy. So you gave that oath saying, I will. And you wrote that blank check right there, said, I will do whatever you say to do. So I did not go fight. I wasn't a ground sailor. I was a fleet sailor. And that story's coming up a little bit about being a fleet sailor a little bit later. But, nurses, let's talk about the wounded soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen get a lot of the attention. Okay. What about those nurses? What about those doctors that took in these hundreds of injured, some dying and some died, and worked on them hour after hour after hour? And we think about the combat veteran who was scared, but do we think about that nurse who was working on that boy, keeping that boy from going into shock, talking to him, holding his hand while the doctor's taking off his leg or both legs or his arm? Those nurses don't get enough credit as far as I'm concerned. We just recognized a Vietnam nurse just a few months ago, and she received a statue. She hadn't been back since. Why? Did she do it just because I asked her to, or we asked her to? Is she got post traumatic stress? We don't know, but we got to give those nurses our thoughts every once in a while. So let's get back to the Tet Offensive. And
I just want to bring up really quick before you jump into the Tet Offensive, which I'm very excited to do that as well. But I was very humbled. I had a conversation, another interview that I did with a woman who she worked in the ER, and like she was never in country. However, when you hear her story of it was 24/7 doing some of the most gruesome work and amazing work, that it's easy to think about the title and write off the service. Yep. But when you hear the story, it's unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable the what she did with her time in the military. It was fascinating. It's very humbling to me.
I'm so proud to say that we have nurses at the Vietnam Wall. We have a statue of nurses taking care of the soldiers, and that's to be recognized and talked about and looked at and pictures taken, because that's why I bring it up, because not only were we a morgue, we was close to 2 hospital ships, and we saw helicopter after helicopter after helicopter going to these hospital ships, and not thinking what was going on inside that hospital ship until years after. So, but anyway, Tet Offensive. I'm 18 years old. I'm just fresh over there. We probably got into our first action with combat cargo supply and stuff in country. And I got a notification from the Red Cross. By the way, you'll like this. Those 12, 15 combat cargo guys, my commander was a lieutenant, a captain in the Marine Corps, and my NCO was a tubby little gunnery sergeant, named Barnett, and he was a character. He was just a round barrel, and he barked orders like a true 100% Marine. And we kept saying to him, "We are not Marines. Do not treat us like Marines. We are sailors. You have to be nicer to us." Well, he didn't get the message.
Nope.
And the captain was an enlisted. He was a Mustanger. He was a staff sergeant when he went to OCS and became a second lieutenant. But anyway, so I get this Red Cross message, and my dad had a severe heart attack in Colorado, and not expected to live. So I hadn't been deployed hardly at all. It was late '67 now, early. We're getting ready to go into '68, and so I go back home, and I stay there a few weeks with my dad, and he makes it. He comes out of it okay. Bad, he had a heart attack. Good that I went back to see him. Even better yet, I met the girl that I married during that time that I was home for those few weeks, and met her, went back to Vietnam, had a few letters, met her again, had a few letters, and the third time in 1969 we got married. So we dated 3 times in these long months and got married. Ended up being married for 51 years. So a win for my dad for having a heart attack for his son. You know, he did what was necessary to get me hooked up. I told him that. I said, "Hey, you know, Dad, you had this heart attack for a reason, because I wouldn't have found out if you wouldn't have had this heart attack. I never came back home." So,
yep.
So anyway,
Wow.
My emergency leave's over. I'm headed back to Vietnam. We go to Okinawa, and then we go to Clark Air Force Base and then Manila, and then Manila we finally get a transport to Saigon. And while you're flying, before you get back to your units, you're all unarmed. You're in your Class A uniforms, and you're flying with an unarmed ship. It's a transport ship. It's not a combat ship. So we're in a C-130, and we land in at Saigon at Ton Son Air Force Base, and we're taxiing to where we get to the ladder to disembark, and we hear small arm fire, and we can't take cover. I mean, there's no place to hide this airplane. You know, just take it if this thing happened. Well, the North Vietnamese shot out the tires to stop the airplane from moving any farther. And after it was all said and done, the people we talked to when we finally disembarked said, we think that their plan was to disable the plane and then move in and then shoot up the plane and take out everybody who was in there, which would have reduced the number of people they was going to have to fight later on. So that's what our people told us they thought was going on, but that didn't happen. 2 Jeeps came out with 20s and took care of Charlie, and there was a sayonara song sung after the little pricks were shot and killed, and we got to all of our bases. And I went to a place called the Annapolis Hotel, which is a rundown hotel place where it was in Saigon. It was not really a hotel. It was rickety racks, and we were bunks, and two bunks to a rack. But as we got there that night, we were straight to our bunks and everything like that. Again, more small arms fire, and we're on the second floor, and all enlisted on the second floor, and all the commissioned officers are on the first floor, and we hear small arm fire, and now we're grabbing mattresses, and which not really a good piece of protection, but it's the only thing we could think to hide behind, and within 20 minutes we was told that the situation, we heard a lot of gunfire. We heard the situation taken care of, and that next morning we all got up and found out there was an ensign and a Lieutenant JG that were both killed by combat troops from the North Vietnamese, and there was other officers wounded, but they had the bottom floor. If it wouldn't have and none of them were armed either. So that was my first experience of any kind of combat firing, and nothing to do, just hope you didn't get shot because you had no way to protect yourself. So the next morning we go to the armory, and there's a great big old chief petty officer in the Navy, and he's barking out orders and issuing guns, M16s, to all of us. And I'm saying, this ain't right. What the hell they giving us guns for? Uh, I had my whole plan to tell him when I got up there, and I did. I said, "Hey, Chief," I said, I don't think you understand. I said, "I'm a fleet sailor." I said, "I went straight from boot camp to an aircraft carrier. I never had anything to do with small arms fire except for training at boot camp." I said, "I don't even know how to operate that weapon. I know how to pull the trigger. I did that when I was a kid." But I said, "Plus, Chief," I said, "I'm a lover, not a fighter." I'm thinking it's going to be kind of funny. He pushed that M16 to my chest like I thought it was going to come out the backside. There's a Marine corporal over there who was issuing all the ammunition. He said, "Hey, Corporal, get 2 bandoliers for this lover, and you escort him over to the embassy and show him where his duty station is going to be until he gets out of here." I thought, fuck, I pissed him off, man. So off I go to the embassy. And the embassy is the famous picture where the CH-46 is landing on the top of it, and you see that ladder of steps where all the Vietnamese are trying to go up to get on these ships. So that was the embassy. That was my duty station. And while I was there, I worked with another corporal in the Marine Corps who basically gave me the training of the nomenclature of an M16 and showed me how to load it, how to ram a shell into the chamber and aim it and fire it if I needed to. And I never forgot that Marine, because I honestly probably could have figured it out. But again, we had no training. We were. I don't know about the rest of the guys. I talked to the rest of them when we were playing cards and having fun. But most of them were in the same boat I was. They didn't know how to use weapons. So my 2 weeks there, that's all it was. My 2 weeks when I was on the embassy, it was usually at nighttime. My shift was late afternoon, early evening, and Charlie was This was the beginning of Tet Offensive, which I found out probably 2 or 3 months later, after listening to all that's going on, and then the bodies coming in. We talked about a lot what was going on over there, and I think it was the month of February or March. I think it was March. Then when I was over there, then I found out about it, and then we started talking about me being in Saigon during that time, and I told the boys the stories. I said, "Hey, you never know what happened on my way to the grocery store, type of story, So I told them all about it, and they were all in, geez, no shit, god damn, you're lucky to be back. I said, that's kind of what I thought, and it wasn't quite, I didn't say I was in any gunfights. I didn't make any stories up, but nevertheless, that and not that I needed credit for it. There was no way for me to document this, is because you don't have orders to go to Saigon. It's just a stop. Okay, so maybe somewhere in there, it said Okinawa, Clark Air Force Base, Philippines, and then Saigon, Vietnam. It might say that somewhere, showing how, because they knew where I was. I mean, when I landed to get my orders, and they knew how to get a hold of the Valley Forge, and how the Valley Forge was going to be close to Saigon at this certain time. So I get on another helicopter and I go back to my ship. So, I mean, we're talking about people who are not doing the fighting. They do the organization to get everybody to where they're supposed to be. They operate the flight plans and the convoys or whatever you're going to be in. So it's amazing how our military works. I mean, we had all 5 branches on that aircraft, and they had places for every branch to go. Each one of them had a place. So organization is so important. So that's pretty much it. The rest of my story, other than the fact that my wife in our dating, I went back to the Valley Forge and served out my time there. And when I went back to get married in '69, middle of '69, when I was getting ready to go back to the Valley Forge, uh, I was told when I picked up my new orders that the Valley Forge was going to be decommissioned in 1970, so they wasn't going to waste money by buying an airplane ticket and flying me back over there and doing all the stuff they had to do to get me back to my aircraft carrier. So they assigned me to San Diego to another ship. So I was assigned to two other ships, one to help decommission it, and then the other one was a cargo ship that I spent about my last 6 months on when we went back to Vietnam one more time. And this is when my wife was 2 weeks from having a baby, and I did another one. I said, "Hey, can't you just leave me here for 2 weeks? I'll catch up with you later." And they kept saying, "You are GI, you are government issue. You don't get special favors, boy. Get on this boat, and let's go." So I was on the coast of Vietnam when I got another Red Cross message says wife and baby girl doing fine. So I here again, I among thousands of veterans who were overseas when their wives had their babies.
Well,
So that's pretty much it.
Well, it's a fascinating story and very, very sobering, very humbling. And I love how you mentioned it takes, every single branch and every single piece of each unit inside of that branch to make it all work. Without one or two of them, everything falls apart, regardless of combat, not combat, no matter where you were. And yet, I think you oftentimes hear people talk about, especially with our generation, with, being, or with my generation in Iraq, and people getting out now that people aren't going. There's this big stigma about not getting to deploy, whereas people get really bent out of shape about not getting that opportunity to deploy. Did you experience anything like that, or did anybody around you did you see anything like that?
No, can't say that I. We would talk to some of the Marines that did come back, because they did their rotation, and then we'd get them and we'd meet them on the mess deck and stuff like that. We'd visit with them, and we'd see some of the guys had arms and shoulder in a sling, and some might be limping and stuff like that. So these were the wounded Marines that we would be sitting with and talking to, and we would visit with them about stuff like that. But as far as and I'll go back to your story and recall a couple things. I've talked to many civilians who walk up to me and see my hat and say, "Sir, I want to thank you for your service." And I always come back and I say, "Well, thank you very much for saying that. Did you serve? I want to find out." They say, "No, I didn't because," and I'm sorry I didn't because. And so to go to your point, yeah, I guess I have experience because there's a lot of civilians that didn't. So I can understand how there would be a lot of men and even women in uniform now that I'm one of the gals that on my board of directors. She was a supply sergeant and for 6 years. She had orders to deploy to Afghanistan, and they were at the ready. They were all ramped up, ready to go, and something happened, and her outfit didn't have to go. And she talked about it. So I guess you're asking me that question. It has happened to me. I never remembered it because nobody really talked about it until you brought it up. But yeah, so I've had several people, civilians and military, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't get a deploy and see action."
When it brings me back to your point, though, too, when you said you signed that blank check of, "Hey, I'm going to do whatever you say," that when you sign up, there's a lot of choices that you don't get to make. In fact, most of them, you don't know where you're going. You don't know if you're getting deployed. I know plenty of people that are in traditional quote unquote combat roles that didn't deploy. When we did the initial invasion in Iraq, our whole first recon battalion went, and they left an entire platoon behind. And those guys were heartbroken, but that wasn't their choice. But that's what happened. And now they went and deployed at a different time, but they weren't in charge. Nobody, the military doesn't ask you, what do you want to do? Like, when frankly they don't really care.
Exactly right. And remember, in my generation, and in Korea, and in World War II, draft. We're grabbing your neck and we're putting you in the army, and you're going to go and do whatever we tell you to do. Well, every one of those, especially in World War II, I hear so many stories on YouTube and stuff like that. When I heard about Pearl Harbor, I lied about my age, or I had my parents sign that I was 17 years old. So they were lying to get in because they wanted to go and retaliate against Japan and do whatever they had to do. Well, I could be kind of considered, yeah, little coward. You got drafted and you didn't go. You went to the Navy. And I would accept that. I'd say, absolutely right. I did not want to go. I mean, I wanted to serve. I got my notice. I wanted to do whatever I could, and I did. But I had a choice, and I think everybody that got drafted had that same choice. What they did and didn't do is it was up to them. But going on your point, I didn't look to be in Saigon. I didn't plan to be in Saigon. I'm not happy that I was in Saigon. I'm glad that I have that little piece that I could talk about. I have no proof, so it's that old joke. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You prove me wrong, but I don't have to worry about that because I know it's the truth, and I am so proud of my 3 years and 6 months that I did not reenlist. I'm like the guy that didn't join. I wished I would have reenlisted. I wished I'd probably stayed for 20, but I was mad at the Navy because I didn't get to see the birth of my daughter. So I was retaliating against the Navy. Plus, it was I'm making $118 a month, and now I got to support a wife and a child, and I'm not the only one. Everybody's in the same boat I am that had kids. But I went to my chief petty officer on this last boat, and I said, I want to know what I can do. I said, my wife's in rural town in Kansas, pregnant or had a baby, and she's having a tough time taking care of it. I said, what's the chances of me getting stationed somewhere closer? So what they ended up doing, I got an honorable discharge under hardship conditions. So all my DD 214 says honorary discharge, and then you read down there at the bottom. It's not a black flag or anything like that. But if anybody wanted to know what it was the fact that I was going to go back and take care of my wife, brand new baby, which was I got out 2 months and a few days before my end of my career. So I figured I served 4 years. What the hell?
Oh yeah, you did your time.
But I really liked it, and it's something else I wanted to talk about. But I here again that gray matter got in there, took it away.
I'd love to ask you about what you're currently involved in, veterans honoring veterans.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do with that?
Well, we'll start at the beginning on that one. I was not every ship, once it's decommissioned, creates a reunion committee, but our ship did. In 1970, there was a handful of sailors that said, we need to get together every year and have a reunion and have a party. There's a lot of Army units, Marine Corps units, and Air Force units. They all do the same thing. So I joined the reunion committee and started going to reunions. And in 2017, I was in Colorado Springs, at the reunion they was holding there, and a sailor got up during the banquet, and he was a lieutenant commander, and he went to the LDO program, limited duty officer. He made it to I think chief petty officer, and went over and got commissioned as an ensign, and went up to and he became I guess he's a commander, but anyway, it doesn't make a difference. He got up and he called another sailor up to the podium. And when the other sailor got up there, he handed him this little figurine. I'm going to step away for just a second. I'm going to grab one of these statues. Can I give you an idea what they look like?
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to bring you two of them. One I'm jealous of, and the one that I have to accept. This is the one that I accept. This is what they look like. So we hand whatever branch of service the person's in. The Marine Corps is a Marine, scratched down, got a rifle in his hand, fully combat ready, and really a good looking. Got a K-bar on the back of his hip and stuff like that. But the one I'm jealous of is this one. If you look at the detail of this, I mean, this is for the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, is this not a well done piece of art? The face,
it's beautiful.
the flat top haircut. So, so going back to what I do, the sailor was given these little statues out to other sailors for their service in the Navy. And after the banquet was all done, I said, my wife and I went over to his table and I introduced myself because I didn't know him. He came aboard the ship after I was gone, but I visited with him. He told me he did that in his home state, and I asked him. I says, "Is it a franchise? You have to pay to get in?" He said, "No." He says, "You want to do it? Do it." So when I came back home to Loveland, I met with about 4 or 5 other veterans and one civilian. And the one civilian you might know is Brad Hoops. And I asked them about it and told them what I wanted to do, and they were all on board. So with everybody's help, we formed a nonprofit called Veterans Honoring Veterans, and we started that in 2017. And to date, we've presented close to 740 statues to veterans, mostly in northern Colorado. We've mailed some off, but we are really, really excited at what we're doing, and we're excited because we have. And I hate to say this, I'm ashamed to say it, but it's the only one thing I do. We're 500 statues behind. We have people on the waiting list that have signed up to get one of the statues. And number one, we don't have enough money. Number two, we don't have enough time. So we do a statue presentation on the first and third Saturdays at the Golden Corral. We'll be doing one this Saturday. You're invited to come down and see it. It's but we just can't do as many as there are waiting, and we got a lot of veterans in northern Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
But God, that's fun. It really is.
Well, they're absolutely beautiful. What is it, if you don't mind me asking, just because are you accepting donations? I mean, if somebody wanted to pitch in to help out,
yeah. Thanks for bringing that in. If somebody wants to donate, each one of these statues, the statue itself costs $50 to make, and the statue maker does not make these individually like this. He's got a mold. It's pretty simple for him to do, but it's still a job. As a matter of fact, the veteran that does these, or the guy does, is a veteran from northern Colorado in Loveland. So we can now say that this is an American-made, Colorado-made, Loveland-made by a veteran. Be very proud of it. So this is $50, and then the little nameplates that we put on them is $10. So it's a $70 statue, and we have a website if anybody is interested in donating. It's veteranshonoringveterans.org, and when you open it up, there's a donate button. But I really want you to open it up, and I want you to look because we've got pictures of everybody that we've ever issued a statue to, and we got them in groups of 5s and 6s and 7s. We got some videos in there of some of our presentations. So feel free to go to veteransonveterans.org and take a look and see what we've been doing for the last few years.
Well, I love it. That's amazing work. I would imagine that everybody was very excited when each person individually is excited when they get to receive one.
That we've seen tears, literally, and I say that, and I'm proud to say it, because a lot of these veterans did not get a thank you when they got home. They got the opposite. Especially the Vietnam soldiers, they were mistreated a lot when they were in uniform by people. So me and our organization doing this is just a way to say, hey, Dad, thank you for your service. I appreciate what you did. We had a little quick story. We had an Air Force veteran that declined to get one. Said, no, he says, give it to someone that is more deserving, and I thank you for your offer, but well, he kept coming to breakfast, and pretty soon the guys kept saying, you really need to get one of these. So he finally called my procurement officer and talked to her, and she started writing down some of the information for the statue, because we ask obviously what branch and if you did deploy to a combat zone, and if you did, what kind of achievements did you make, medals did you receive. And we do that for the ones that did deploy too, because there's an awful lot of people that have done so much in the non-combat zone that they got noted for. They got awards or medals, stuff like that. So this guy ends up, we only do one nameplate for every veteran. Well, this guy that was so humble to not take one ended up with the front plate and 2 on both sides, because he was decorated with 2 Purple Hearts. He had 6 Air Medal stars, or Air Medal insignias, and then he had 4 of something else. He had something to be very proud of, but he was so humble. So when he received his statue during the presentation, he got a little choked up about it when he said thank you and took his picture. And when I came out after it was all done, I come away from the microphone and I try to shake everybody's hand and tell them how proud I am of them. And I said, how did we do it? I said, we get your name spelled right and everything on your name. He said, yeah. And I saw a little tear down there. I said, well, good. I said, every once in a while we'll screw up with spelling a name. I said, did you like the side plates? He said, what side plates? I said, well, with what you did, we did a little extra for you. And he looked at both side plates and had the other medals that he earned. And he literally quit talking. He just choked up, said thank you, and I let him go. So
that's wonderful.
We had a World War II veteran at a nursing facility, and when we gave his statue to him, he held it up like it was a first place trophy. And we got a picture of him on the front page of our local Loveland paper when we did that, because the reporter Harold was there and got him doing that. And he was, that's what it's all about.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Making people feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free to them. They don't pay a nickel for it. And that's what we want. We want to make sure. And so that's why we take donations and we don't turn them down. But the toughest part of my job, Thad, with this statue president, is having these veterans come up and shake my hand and not have a challenge coin, but have a check or a 50 or 100. These veterans know it's free, but they know what we have to do to get it. So I say, no, you don't have to do it. No, we have to. So I have to argue with these guys about giving me money. And I'm told by my board of directors, quit arguing. Just take their damn money. I said, well, I feel bad about it. This is my baby. I don't want to take money from them. So, but they've got a heart of gold. A lot of them.
Well,
Love them.
I think with that too, number one, I'm imagining you arguing with veterans because that's definitely not a stubborn bunch. So, just the
Tough,
headlocking
yeah.
that would
Button head,
happen.
yeah.
Yet it almost, for me, it seems like with taking the money, and I don't know if this gives a different perspective of it, but for me, I would imagine them feeling like they're buying the one for the next person.
Paying it
That
forward.
it's not they're paying for theirs, they're paying it forward. I think is a beautiful. That's what my first thought was, that they're buying the next person's.
I'm glad you put that
And I think
spin
that's
on it, because that's exactly the way I'll look at it.
I think it's a special thing.
I was thinking that they felt sorry for me, but I don't think that's what it is. I honestly, and they not said that, but that is a perfect explanation, and that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah. When they gave me the next number, I said, they just buys 2 more statues.
Yeah, theirs is already paid for. Yeah, theirs is already paid for. They're buying the next person's.
Yep. So,
which is a great thing, and that is literally veterans honoring veterans.
Yeah, and there's a lot of veterans organizations out there, and there's one other one we found when we started looking at our name in California. It said Veterans Honoring Veterans, and we did our due diligence to make sure that we wasn't infringing on another organization, and making sure that what we did was not what they did. So we wouldn't be taking somebody else's name. But been going since 2017, and we've kept our name, and we're moving on.
Well, keep doing amazing work. I love that you do it. I'm excited. I will make it down for one of these. I've heard
Please do.
Such amazing things about these breakfasts, and I am definitely going to make it down and come check it out. So.
Well, it's not a club. You don't have to pay dues. We don't have a president or a CEO. When I get on a microphone and there's been a screw up before me, I always say, I said, you got to understand that you are in the most unorganized organization that's ever been put together. This hand does not know what this hand's doing, and we've been doing it since 2008, so we must be doing something right.
Oh yeah, wow. And speaking of unorganized organizations, it makes me think of how unorganized being in the actual military can feel too sometimes. It's like how they get things.
We bragged about how it worked.
Yeah.
But we can't tell these civilians how bad it don't work sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really
like when people say, "Oh, you got military grade firearms." Like, well, don't insult my firearms. Like mine are.
Yeah, let's talk about the M16, about a military grade firearm.
Right. Yeah.
I heard a lot of stories about that weapon.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put a link in for Veterans Honoring Veterans.org if anybody wants to jump on and donate, at least to check it out. And as we close this up, I'd love to ask you, knowing that you've met a ton of veterans, one thing that we like to shed light on, that I like to shed light on, is just get advice or things that help veterans as they transition out of the military. And what advice would you offer up to any veterans that are getting out? What do you see that veterans that are being successful or just having a successful civilian life, what are the things they're doing?
Pretty easy to answer that, but the problem of it is I don't get to meet very many that just get out. So I meet them out after they've been out for a while, and they've already started having some of their problems, and most of their problems were already there before they got discharged. So my first comment is the military is not doing and never has done a good job of releasing a veteran back into civilian life. They do not spend enough time with certain veterans. Other ones, the transition is fairly easy, but when you've been in a military organization for at least 4 years, your mechanics have totally changed. It's not mom letting you sleep in the morning and mom not fixing you supper and mom folding your bed. There's none of that stuff. It all goes away, and now people are screaming and yelling at you, where dad might have screamed and yelled at you a couple times because you didn't pick up the tools in the garage or something like that, but nothing like the military gives you. So that transition is fairly easy for the common veteran, but the combat veteran, the pilot that's been flying and if he or she gets into another job of flying, then that's pretty easy. But the ground grunt individual needs to hook up immediately with a veterans group. The VA, we have a place called it's up in Fort Collins off of I can't think, but it's for veterans that are struggling with post traumatic stress, and they get in there in groups, and they get therapy, and they get counselors, and they do one on one, they do group therapy. If you're a veteran like that, reach out to those veteran organizations immediately. Get yourself somebody that can guide you on that road instead of veering off and going places where you shouldn't go. And every veteran should be able to survive once they get out. But we have so many homeless veterans that I can't believe that there's so many homeless veterans. And then I even hate to talk about the 22. There's so many organizations that acclimated with the 22, and that's suicide. And I've got a lady on our board of directors whose son was in the Marines for 6 years, got out. Year after he got out, he committed suicide. And her and I sat down, not talked about it, but I knew what happened. So she needed, well, I'm not going to call us counselors, but she needed something like us to draw her into the environment of happiness and seeing people get statues. I gave her and her grandson a statue of a Marine soldier, a Marine Corps, a Marine, and with all his information. So the grandson thought that it was going to be his when he first saw it. So he argued with grandma about who got the statue of his uncle. So when she told me the story, obviously I got another one. But her and her family, I met her family. She was so impressed. They talked her into to come and look at us. So she's a volunteer for us. So now she's get to see the happiness and come as a civilian to our breakfast club and talk to other veterans and be part of our family. So that was a win when she came. But back to the veteran, find a buddy, find a fellow veteran. It doesn't have to be a Marine or a sailor, an airman or a soldier. Find somebody that you can talk to, that you can share with. You know, if it is a civilian, great. Most likely, it's not going to be a spouse. Spouses sometimes don't want to hear, and you don't want to talk to them. So, but don't hold it in. Let it out. Get it out. Go somewhere. We have. It's a shame that we're having the problem we're having with our young veterans. And I know that 22 number has changed. I hear worse numbers, but one is too many. So
yep.
That's why I go back to our government. We've got to do something prior to releasing our veterans. And when I say our veterans, not the combat veterans, are male and females that have been verbally abused, sexually abused, male and female, the whole 9 yards. I mean, every one of them. And we don't know that from all of them because not all of them make claims. Some of them
Right.
keep it within themselves until after they get out, and then it's out. They're out, and it's kind of too late. So it's one of those things that your top NCO needs to watch what's going on in their particular area of what's happening. If that young corporal is getting mouthed by everybody, then he's probably getting some problems in his head. And I know we're tough, and I'm not saying don't be tough when you're in basic training, even a little bit afterwards. But let's let it go, tough guys. We don't need to beat these these helpless little people, because you're making them more helpless when you do that. It sounds like I'm counseling, and I'm not a counselor, but
I love the advice of reaching out, getting help. Like definitely reach out, talk to somebody, don't hold it in, which I think somebody once explained it like shaking up a Coke bottle. You can only shake it up so much, and it gets so much pressure. If you don't have a release valve, it's not going to get better on its own.
Analogy. Perfect analogy, yeah.
Well, Bart,
anyway,
thank you.
Just remember that you're loved out here, and we need you. There's a job for you. There's a place in this civilian world for you. So
I love it. Thank you so much, Bart. I really appreciate you taking some time today, and I appreciate and just absolutely love and respect what you're doing for veterans to this day. Thank you so much.
I don't need thanks, but I appreciate it, and but thank you for taking the time to visit with me. And the next time I see you, I hope it's a breakfast.
I'm looking forward to it. 1 million veterans. Empowering 1 million veterans is my mission. My name is Thad David, and if you like this mission or this podcast, there's a few things you could do to help me out. And number 1 is just leave a 5-star review and let the world know that you enjoyed this show. Number 2, follow or subscribe the show wherever you're watching. And number 3, share it with as many people as you think would find value in it. Now, if you have direct feedback for me, or if there's anything that I can do to personally help you out, please reach out to me directly at victoriousveteranproject@gmail.com. I truly look forward to hearing from you. Conquer today.